Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Businesses are rapidly retooling distribution centers to meet new and unexpected demand. But between travel constraints and event cancellations, it can be challenging for supply chain professionals to access first-hand information on the technologies that can carry their fulfillment operations into the future. Six River Systems' second annual conference, Flow, is designed to help. Taking place September 16th and 17th, the fully interactive online event will feature more than 30 sessions and over 40 speakers discussing all things fulfillment, logistics, and automation. That means that no matter where you are, the content, networking opportunities, and insights you need to optimize your fulfillment operation will be right at your fingertips. See what all the excitement is about and register for free at sixriver.com/flow2020. That's sixriver.com/flow2020.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode. On this episode, I am going to be joined by Mike Kinder. He is the co-founder and CEO at Veryable. Veryable is kind of changing the way we look at on-demand staffing and bringing more tech to it. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about Veryable. He's also he's the co-founder, as I mentioned. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about how Veryable was founded, and then talk to us about his background. He has an interesting background, and also talk to us a little bit about the labor market and what we're going to be seeing with Industry 4.0 and how the Internet of Things is going to kind of play a role in that as well, especially in the labor market. So, Mike, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Definitely happy to have you on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Veryable and what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, we're a tech marketplace, as you mentioned. We're trying to solve for a problem, an operational problem. And the operational problem goes something like, I'm running a manufacturing site or a distribution center. My demands are crazy. My lead times are very tight. Product customization is really demanding. And I have a really hard time balancing supply and demand. And I think this is the common problem right now, where the old smoothing and planning techniques of the old days just aren't cutting it anymore based on what the market needs. So we're saying fundamentally, we're challenging the idea that everything has to be a job. We think a lot of the work just needs to be work, and it needs to be set up in a way that you can access it, almost like cloud computing, pay as you go, and then really double down on where those recurring needs are, so you can staff your shop to where you think that stable, steady demand is going to be, and then use our platform for all the rest and grow your business. You'll be really opportunistic. Don't let the whole structural challenge that comes with jobs weigh you down. So that's what we're trying to provide.
Definitely, I think it's interesting because it's when you just mentioned, working at things as a job and basically having your core labor as your stable state, and then obviously in distribution manufacturing we have these peak times and times where things spike and demand spikes, like you mentioned, and it made me think of kind of how some of the robotics companies are providing now, like robots as a service. Like we talked to Locust Robotics on the show, and they have peak robots that they provide during peak time. So it's almost kind of the same model a little bit, but with the labor. So when I looked at your site a little bit, and you can tell us a little more about how it works, but I guess my understanding is that you're able to go on the site and you can select people for certain jobs, right? And then you can also put out the opportunity for certain jobs, and it's only for like very specific tasks. Like I need somebody to do this for like 3 days. Is that kind of the right understanding of it?
Yeah, it's right on the money. And I like the robot comparison. I mean, so take robots, take cloud storage, take any of these, analogies.
Right.
It's all about accessing capacity in real time. So whether that capacity is in the form of a robot or in the form of storing, digital bits of memory, whether it's, accessing human time and capabilities, I think that's the name of the game. It's really hard to plan for these needs. And, if you're running, let's say, a 3PL and you've got deliveries that hit certain times a week, and if you don't get those trucks turned around quick, they're going to balk and they're going to leave. I mean, you've got a limited window to unload trucks and get that product stored. And then, what do you do with those resources when, there aren't any trucks to, unload, and if there's nothing to pick and pack, so you end up kind of trying to smooth it. And I just see this failing today. I see it failing with every passing day as needs get tighter and demands get tighter. So, call it the gig economy, I think of it more like playing in fractions. So how do we access the fractional capacity on one side and match that with fractional needs on the other? And you can't really do that with jobs. You can't really do that with fixed assets. So like robot leasing. Yeah, I think that's way superior than buying a robot. You'd rather lease a robot, use it when you need it, and then send it back. So what we're trying to promote is like, you do this with any leasing model where you pool assets. We're essentially pooling resources onto the platform, so businesses can essentially share, and people can kind of hedge their work experience. So like, one of the things I hate to see is the guy that, signs up, to go work for this company, and that the company decides they want to send their plant to China or Mexico or something, guy's back to square one. And, if that person had, 20 different businesses that they interact with and derive income from, they're much more neutralized against these types of situations. So we're pooling it on both sides.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's kind of, it's almost taking the idea of the traditional temp service, temporary employee service for distribution and manufacturing, and bringing it kind of to now and making it very much more on demand, and I think easier to have more flexibility with. So, since you're the co-founder, I mean, having this idea and hearing the way that you're talking about this, obviously you have some different kind of experience than just starting a tech company, right? So your background, I'm sure something must have happened in your background that led you to come up with this idea. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your background and kind of how you came to start Veryable?
Yeah, I'm a manufacturing guy through and through. I've done manufacturing my entire career, almost 20 years now. And so, unlike a lot of companies I see where you end up like a hammer looking for a nail, like I've got an idea, I'm going to see if this idea is applicable. And this idea was really just born out of my personal experience. First, running plants. Just, I used to run make-to-order plants for GE, where every product is a unique configuration. And when you try to plan your line rates and things like that, it gets very difficult because you got to factor in all the different cycle times across all the different variants of products. And lead times are always extremely tight, and it's a really hard thing to do. And lean gives you a fighting chance to survive. But I think the limitation of lean is that you end up letting the market down. So if I am essentially signaling to the market that I have certain constraints, then I can fill my shop up to a certain level. And if I reach that certain level, then I'm going to tell you that I can't deliver on time to your request. And so you end up promising that out in the future. And the market's rejecting that. I'm seeing that a lot now, where if you're buying a pump, for example, you don't really care what brand is on the pump, no matter what anybody says. If you need a pump tomorrow for your job site, you're going to go get the pump from whoever can get it to you tomorrow. And better yet, if you can get it the way you need it. So I think that's what businesses are facing right now, is a rejection of the smoothing techniques. And they've got to get more creative on how to access capacity quickly to satisfy the real needs of the market. So that's what I saw a lot in my personal experience running plants. But when I started doing consulting, I started really digging into industrial technology and how that was going to impact the landscape, because I would argue that industrial technology is still mostly hype and promise. There's just not a ton of adoption yet. So I think there's a lot of confusion on how to architect the right solutions, because everything is a tech forward push. Take a look at this cool capability. You should go do this. If I'm running a plant, I go, well, maybe, but is that my top priority? How does that fit into the other priorities? Like there's a broader solution I have to architect before I know whether or not that's a good solution for my business. So I started looking at a lot of this stuff, and what you end up with, typically when you look at IoT, you look at connected factory, any additive technologies, robotics, cobotics, you get a lot of measurement and analysis, but not a lot of immediate value creation. So it's like the Six Sigma lean battle. Are you measuring stuff and then you just have to take action on the back end? And if you have to take action on the back end, that's still a huge burden on the people running the plant. So I thought, if we have all the technology necessary to measure to that degree of accuracy, we could use that same technology to enable. So for example, if I had a virtual industrial engineer that could tell me how productive people are on the floor, then I could turn that technology around and just instruct people on the floor how to do the work. That's overly simplified, but I think it's kind of applicable. It'd be like if you bought something from IKEA and it had a little robot there laughing at you when you were 3 times longer on assembling it than you should have. And you're like, hey, little robot, why didn't you just tell me how to do it faster? Yeah. Why didn't you tell me in real time versus laughing at me at the end when I was 3 times over budget on assembly time?
Right. So
what was missing to me was the mechanism to create value on the front end and give the other technology a reason to exist. So if I had a more liquid labor market, I could apply a lot of these smart technologies to make that liquid labor market more productive. And so that's what we're trying to provide, is that liquidity, and the other technology will help enable that.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that idea, and I think that you had an interesting point in there when you're talking about how at this point in the economy and the consumer behavior is people are rejecting the idea that a company only has a certain capacity, and I think a lot of that has been driven just by, I guess, individual consumer. I mean, you used the example of a commercial consumer, but even just an individual consumer, you're used to in your daily life now. You order something and it's always there. I mean, it's very rare now that you run into something you need, like you mentioned, just something you need for a job or for an essential thing, and you can't find some type of variation of it from some company to get it to you in 2 days. So I think you have a good point there where, it's not necessarily working where companies are just well, this is our capacity, and so this is the lead time. And, if somebody sees it's going to take 7 days, they're looking for what's going to take, 2 days instead. So I think it has changed a lot like that. So,
Yeah, right on, Kevin. I call it the Amazon effect, and you can see right now, I don't know if you've done this in the last couple of weeks, but I've gone on Amazon a ton over the last couple of weeks, and I'm so put out when Amazon Prime is at a week. I'm going, well, no, wait a second, that's unacceptable. And so imagine, because you get accustomed to it, it's next day, 2 days, and just any way you want it. And that's what buyers are experiencing now. When they go in, it's okay, I got to go buy my pump, and it's 6 weeks. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah,
give me a break, and then And then if you play the supply chain all the way down, it's like, where are the constraints? It's either materials, like my suppliers, or labor. It's usually not fixed assets. I never find that to be the case. And so you go, my suppliers, labor. Okay, well then double down. Okay, what's going on with those suppliers? Well, it's their suppliers or their labor. And then you continue to work on that all the way down. It's labor all the way down, like turtles. That's where the constraints in the supply chain end up building out. So the answer is like, okay, if we can unlock these labor constraints throughout the supply chain, how much faster could we be overall? It would be a lot faster.
Right, definitely. And I think, you had a good point that, all down the line, one of the constraints has been labor. And even, before this whole COVID-19 pandemic thing, labor for manufacturing distribution especially has been tight because there's just higher and higher demand from consumer and businesses as well, demanding for those products, right? So I'm curious now, since you guys are in touch with the labor market in these manufacturing distribution environments, what kind of changes are you seeing during the pandemic? Because we know a lot of places, and obviously, unemployment is up in areas, but distribution has been pretty strong throughout this because of, like you said, everybody's like going on Amazon, everybody's buying things online because they can't go to certain stores. Things of that nature. What are you guys seeing at Veryable as the changes, and what kind of changes do you think are going to continue to stick as we get past this?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me see if I can parse that out. Starting with the demographics of our operator base, kind of pre-COVID, you've got a really tight labor market, really tight, lowest unemployment ever. Yeah. And our answer to that is we got to find a way to usher more people into this space outside of the labor market. So we're not promoting this like trading over here going on with people that want full-time jobs. We're saying, okay, there's a ton of folks over here that don't want full-time jobs or can't have full-time jobs, but they've got time. It's just unstructured. It's more like freelancer time. So how do we access that to drive the water level up across the whole sector? So that's still our play. So as the employment situation changes within the labor force, that doesn't tend to affect our operator demographics too much because we're already pulling for the folks outside of the labor market, the other 40% of the working age population that isn't in, doesn't have a full-time job, doesn't want a full-time job. But what we're seeing right now is just a massive, just call it disruption, because I think what anyone is saying about unemployment, it's really hard to parse out because, I'm seeing a lot of furloughs. I am seeing a lot of layoffs, but I'm also seeing a lot of consolidation with some of the bigger players. So you mentioned distribution, food distribution has been strong. Right. And so you're seeing a lot of consolidation happening with some of those bigger players. You're seeing a lot of consolidation happening with the Amazons of the world. And you're seeing a lot of the smaller players, and the smaller players by the numbers represent the overwhelming majority of number of businesses. You're seeing them kind of in a holding pattern. I see some of them kind of working on a minimum viable volume type scenario. I see others that have just kind of temporarily shut down and furloughed. But my hunch is that it's gonna bounce back quickly. We're already seeing in Texas, Florida, Georgia, we're seeing a pretty quick spring back. So I don't know what type of arrangements are out there on like recalls, things like this, but I would imagine, and I used to do this as a plant manager, a lot of these businesses had kind of that quick recall list ready to go. So who knows how that's going to respond? I mean, like anything getting that full recoil is probably neither ideal nor possible. But it's going to leave a lot of people displaced, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Definitely, yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes, and I think it'll be interesting to see as well. As people have been, I guess, stuck at home in a sense, and have been shifting more to online consumers. Maybe a lot of people that typically wouldn't spend so much time purchasing things online and may be getting used to it. So it's going to change consumer behavior. I think it's going to drive that demand in like e-commerce and distribution even more. So it'd be interesting to see how that changes the labor market long term. So you mentioned, and you mentioned previously, you're talking about kind of the forward push for technology, and talking about technology and how it's kind of pointing out what you did wrong after you did it, right? So how do you think, since you guys are taking like this technology driven approach to the labor market, how do you see the next wave of industry taking place, like Industry 4.0? How do you see that coming into play in like a practical standpoint, from a labor market standpoint, but also from your experience as a plant manager as well?
Yeah, I'll use that last discussion as a segue here, because one of the things as we look forward, I think would be reasonable to expect. If you think back to 2008, 2009, in the last recession, what happened to a lot of businesses, and it's like many of the programs, many of the capabilities, many things that were set up prior to 2008 were only realized after the recession forced you to realize full value. So like a business that had 5 IT people, you went down to 1 during the recession. Then you realize, hey, wait a sec, there was a lot of the stuff that I stood up, after the tech, or after the what we call that, the IT boom of the 1990s, early 2000s. The recession kind of forced you to realize full productivity of that, where you didn't do that yourself when you didn't have to. I imagine that same effect is going to happen here. And then you couple that with the demographics, like in manufacturing, the average age is about 50. So you have a lot of folks that are late 60s, early 70s that are probably displaced right now, furloughed, maybe their hours are down, and they're probably not going to return. And I understand why. It's kind of like, all right, this is a sign for me to kind of hang it up. So we're going to be looking at as we scale back up, and probably beyond, as companies revisit their supply chain strategies and realize they were way too over-levered on low-cost buy. They're going to reshore a lot of the stuff. That's already happening. I'm seeing a lot of that already. I think we're going to end up with a net positive on demand as it relates to manufacturing and distribution work, probably in the next couple of years. So where in the world are these folks going to come from? We got to usher in a lot of new people into this space. And I think technology, to answer your question, I think technology really enables that if we play it right. I call it the biggest opportunity for the redistribution of operational intelligence that we've ever had. So if you had, let's say, a platform that housed your production data, let's say assembly information, product information, and all you were doing with that is engineering. Well, now you have an opportunity to redeploy that as an asset, and you can look at all the new people that you have to usher in here and train really quickly, learning curves that you have to push down. Information is your best way to do that, and deploying that information as IP. So when I think of Industry 4.0, I become disenchanted with that term, because everything under the sun gets thrown into Industry 4.0, like smart products. It's the same thing as connected factory. And I'm going, well, the people that are interested in developing smart products are not the same folks that are interested in how do I get more productivity out of my plant or my DC. It's a different set of stakeholders. So we got to kind of think about it differently. So I like to bucket it in 4 categories. The one being the connected site. So that's more IoT driven. How do I kind of sense and optimize in real time? The next category is like robotics and cobotics. The third category being additive manufacturing, and then the fourth being like operator enablement or man-machine interface. or one of those categories. And I think that's probably where it needs to start, because back to that analogy with measurement and analysis. If I had a connected factory and I was able to kind of monitor the comings and goings of things, there's a material benefit there. There's a benefit to labor productivity potentially. There's a benefit to flow and throughput and bottleneck analysis. But unless I'm able to throttle my capacity, I'm kind of playing in a fixed pie, okay, I'm squashing bottlenecks maybe, and I'm getting more throughput there. But I think the name of the game is flexing the denominator. So unless we really focus on how to make the long pole in the tent more effective, I think, labor, then I don't think the other stuff really makes a ton of difference. I think additive kind of falls on its own category, and 3D printing, and I think that's everybody agrees that's pretty awesome. We can figure out how to make that work. Yeah. But I think the name of the game is, how do we get more people there quickly? How do we liquidify and democratize the workforce? How do we enable the workforce with things like real-time work instruction? Whatever the latest and greatest is on augmented reality, the space is kind of going around and around and around. Bottom line, though, is about getting the information right in the hands of the people at the point of use. Like the example I use is a cell phone. I say, I didn't get my cell phone and think, wow, this is going to be a great way for me to remember phone numbers. Like, as I type them in, I'll memorize them better. It's like, no, the phone does the work for you. Yeah. So we shouldn't think of this operator enablement as a way to improve the training process. I mean, it is. It is the process. So the technology is there at the point of use. Let's use it that way, and then let's figure out what needs to be part of training and what actually is just a company IP that can be deployed right there at the point of use.
Interesting. Yeah, I like your perspective on it. I like the obviously I like to call out there, calling out the Industry 4.0 buzzword and how everybody is just throwing everything under that umbrella. But I like your point about how there's kind of two sides to it, where there's the people that are just interested in making the connected factory, like you talked about, because they're looking at it from innovation and tech perspective. And then there's the people that actually want to see how can we get more productivity out of this. And, I think at the end of the day, you got to find that balance. And I think you made some really good points about how do we take that innovation and technology and actually make it practical to use to start to enable the worker, like you said, and also create more workers and maybe make more workers interested or make the job easier for them to do, so we can, kind of fill that potential labor gap that you're referring to. So it will be interesting to see how things play out. And, I really appreciate your perspective on it, and, appreciate everything you said today and hearing about Veryable. I think Veryable is a really interesting concept, and I'm happy that it's come to the market. I think it's something that's it's been needed for that type of labor gap and that type of labor fill in the market. So really, really good stuff. So Mike, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. How can people find out more information about Veryable?
Well, a number of ways. You can go to our website, www.veryableops.com, VERYABLEOPS.com, or yourlaborpool.com, or call me or contact anyone on my team.
Okay, great. And we'll put all that information on the newwarehouse.com as well. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show today and joining me.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Appreciate the time.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.